Dear participants, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. I am Tomoya Obokata from Japan, as just has been introduced, currently serving as the UN Special Rapporteur on contemporary forms of slavery. Allow me to begin by thanking the International United Women Federation and the Alliance Creative Community Project for inviting me to this very important event, and it is an honor to open this panel. My intervention today will focus on my own observations with regard to the experiences of upcountry women in Sri Lanka, where I had a chance to visit officially in 2021. In fact, that was my very first visit as the Special Rapporteur, so Sri Lanka remains very close to my heart. Since my visit, I have been following the economic recession and its implications with great concern. Even though much has happened in the past 2 years, I believe that many of the findings which I reflected in my country visit report are still valid. Before turning to my reflections, however, I would like to refer to a national representative sample survey of 10,000 Sri Lankan households and qualitative research across 13 districts conducted by Lian Asia, published in June 2023. The study found that in estate communities, more than half of the population continues to live in poverty in the aftermath of Sri Lanka's economic crisis. Although it is important to remember that poverty has been an issue in all sectors across the country. In my country visit report, I also highlighted that poverty is a serious problem among Malayaha or upcountry Tamils, which is exacerbated by multiple forms of discrimination on the basis of their descent, gender, and other grounds, making them more vulnerable to labor as well as sexual exploitation. In this regard, I learned that the bonded labor occurs particularly in smaller private plantations, as workers are not allowed to live at their own will after taking up loans from the owners. Although their wages has been increased to 1,000 rupees per day in 2021, workers in other sectors are currently receiving a daily wage of about 3,500 rupees, clearly indicating a discriminatory treatment in the sector. I was informed that the management of estates reportedly impose various conditions, including an increase in daily targets for plucking, and wages are often deducted for unclear reasons. I was also dismayed at living conditions of plantation workers. Historically, they have not been able to own land, which has forced them to live in so-called line houses. built some 150 years ago during colonial times. I visited some of these houses in the Kandy district, and I was alarmed at the undignified, inhumane, and degrading living conditions. I saw that commonly 5 to 10 people have to share a tiny space, and many line houses do not have windows, a proper kitchen, running water, or electricity. Also, several families have to share a latrine, and the government even admits that only 43% of the population living in the estate sector, which includes tea plantations, has access to adequate water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities. My assessment was that these substandard living conditions, combined with the harsh working environment in the estate sector, represent clear indicators of forced labor and may, in some instances, also amount to serfdom. In the meantime, efforts have been made to improve the living conditions of estate workers, for example, by the government of India, which last November announced plans to build another 10,000 houses for estate workers in Sri Lanka as part of the next phase of the Indian housing project. Also, the government of Sri Lanka has taken steps to improve the housing conditions of plantation workers by allocating 14 billion rupees in the 2024 budget. Although this is encouraging, there has been insufficient progress in ending the discrimination of Malayaha Tamils at all levels, including with regard to the land rights and secure tenure for housing and livelihoods. This has hampered not only their economic potential, but also their access to education, healthcare, and other basic services. For example, due to the remoteness of plantations, there are no quality hospitals nearby, and workers often have to pay for private transport to access healthcare, including in the event of emergency. Similarly, although local governments implement social care and development projects, these often do not benefit upcountry community in practice. During my visit, members of the Malayaha community told me that historically their voices have been ignored by the estate management as well as the national government. I also received reports of harassment and surveillance of civil society organizations that stepped in to provide assistance. Furthermore, access to justice and remedies among minority communities are very limited due to discrimination. Finally, I found that in the estate sector, the literacy rate is about 66% in comparison with the urban literacy rate of 92%. This puts estate workers at a further disadvantage as there are limited opportunities for decent work due to lack of education and other opportunities. In relation to women in Sri Lanka, they continue to face intersecting forms of discrimination, including in the estate sector. I learned that in public and private estates, women generally pluck tea leaves and men carry out other tasks such as operating machines. Women generally have to work twice as long as men to earn the same salary due to the low wages for plucking tea leaves. And this is clearly discriminatory. I was also informed that domestic workers who are Malayaha Tamils tend to work longer hours, are paid less, and are known for not reporting their employers due to a fear of reprisals and other obstacles in securing access to justice and remedies. Many of these workers are often living domestic workers, and as a result, they face a higher risk of exploitation and physical, verbal, and sexual harassment and abuse. Another area of concern is microfinancing. Approximately 2.5 million women are said to be trapped in debt from microfinancing companies operating particularly in the informal sector, and this seems to be particularly serious among rural and upcountry communities with many female-headed households. I was informed during my visit that indebtedness has resulted in many suicides as well as sexual and labor exploitation of women. I was encouraged to hear that Sri Lanka launched its national policy on gender equality and women's empowerment exactly 1 year ago on the International Women's Day. One of the key objectives under these policies is to ensure equal opportunities and benefits, legal safeguards, access to training, skill development, and digital innovation, special protections, and access to social security for all women and gender minorities in the formal and informal employment sectors for estate, migrant, domestic, and home-based workers. The establishment of this national policy is commendable, and I believe that it has a real potential to empower the most marginalized women, including upcountry and Malayaha women. And I urge the government to implement this policy as expeditiously as possible. I now wish to highlight some of the recommendations I made in my report on Sri Lanka. Through the Tripartite Plantation Human Development Trust, decent living conditions of workers should be ensured by providing adequate and affordable housing, access to safe water, sanitation, and healthcare for all. Efforts should be strengthened to eliminate ethnic and caste-based discrimination more effectively. In this regard, the government of Sri Lanka must ensure access to quality education, land, and decent work for Malayaha people. Temporary positive measures should be employed in order to rectify the injustice and inequality that they have been suffering historically. I also firmly believe that the number of female leaders within the public authorities and the business community should be increased. It is of vital importance that female leaders from upcountry communities receive a fair chance in this regard. Furthermore, members of minority communities and suppressed caste should be actively involved in all decision-making processes affecting their lives at the local and national levels. Business operating in Sri Lanka, including transnational corporations, need to take on more responsibility to protect the human rights of their workers by implementing the guiding principles on business and human rights. In order to do so, they should conduct human rights due diligence regularly and effectively to identify, prevent, mitigate, and account for potential and actual impacts of their business operations on human rights, including the gender dimensions. Lastly, I wish to stress that from my perspective, decent work, economic empowerment, gender equality, access to land ownership are all intertwined. If all of these areas are promoted inclusively without discrimination, no one will be left behind as per Sri Lanka's commitment made under the Sustainable Development Goals. At the end of the day, economic and social stability is in the interest of everyone in a country. I thank you for your attention and wish you all the best with the rest of this important event.